This is the 5th video of our series that we call Complete Year of Management. This video is going to be in the time frame of around mid-March. This is when we begin to start to heavily manipulate our hives, get into a lot more details of managing hives. We'll start to manipulate them a lot more and start to manage our bee populations to avoid swarming, produce nucs, produce more hives, and at the same time manage the colonies, our production colonies, our existing colonies, manage them to produce an abundance of honey also. So this time frame, the first thing we'll do in each yard we come into, we have a few hives scattered about that was weak over the last month that we have placed over a stronger hive. We had taken these weak colonies, went to a stronger hive, removed the top, put a queen excluder on, and set the whole hive, single box hive, right on top of that queen excluder over a stronger hive, with the queen still in place, and just to strengthen up that weak colony through the queen excluder. At this time, we will remove those, place those over in an empty spot in the yard, or move to another yard wherever we have room for them. We'll move them to there. We'll open them up and look at them and see what they look like now. If they still haven't grown anymore, haven't got any more brood than they had, they should have at least 2 or 3 frames of brood by now. If they was really weak and had a frame of brood, less than a frame of brood early in beginning of March or in late February, by now they should have at least 2 or 3 frames of brood, maybe more. If not, we just kill that queen and combine those frames out of that hive with any other hive. We could add a couple frames of brood into that spot, in that hive. We set it in an empty spot, just move a couple of frames of brood and a queen cell the next day and make a split with it. Or just empty the box out in another hive, or if you have a single box hive that's ready for some more room, ready for a second box, we'll just put it right on top of it. We also have these hives that have overwintered in a single box over a double screen board over the winter. They've been sitting there this whole time. These were, any of them that's above that double screen board were split back in the fall. They were fall splits with a queen cell back in August, and have overwintered in that single box, and now at this time, as we come through the yard, we'll also remove these from the colonies they're sitting over. We'll just set these boxes also into an empty pallet spot, or move them to another yard. Or we also sell some overwintered nucs, and if we sell it as a overwintered nuc, we'll take and use a temporary nuc box to sell them in. It'll be a Jester, Easy Nuc, a Pro Nuc, or a corrugated cardboard nuc like you get from Man Lake. And in that, we'll open these colonies up. We'll pull 3 good frames of brood with the bees, a frame of food with the bees, and also into that nuc we'll add a new clean foundation, and make sure the queen's in that nuc also, and sell that as an overwintered nuc. If we do decide to sell that nuc out of this box, that makes at least behind a very good place to make a split into. So we'll just leave the box in place if we have sold that nuc out of there, and make our splits, make a split into that box. You've already got a good foundation started of foragers coming back to this hive, and some frames already built out. So if it may not need frames of brood, could have plenty left in there. You may actually have to take some out, but if needed, we'll make sure there's at least 2 frames of brood in the box. If they don't have food, they should have plenty of food stored up, but if not, we'll make sure they have at least 1 frame of food in here, and close it up. Next day we'll come back through and add a queen cell. And those splits, any splits that we're making now, we start to make a lot of splits here in the middle of March, and any of these splits that we have made will either be used to pull a nuc out of the cell, just the same way we did this overwintered colony, or we will use those to requeen other existing hives with last year's queens or year before queens. We'll use those to requeen hives with, or pull them off to fill up empty spots in the yard they're in, or in another yard. Our main focus here in the middle of March is to split all of the hives that are able to. We'll start making splits on every existing hive that we've got, and we'll remove bees and brood from every single hive that is able to here in mid-March. And the way we do that, we want to leave behind 4 frames of brood in each hive, and any of the extra brood is moved up into a split, or either moved into a weak colony that don't have 4 frames of brood. We'll move them a frame over to get them up to 4 frames of brood. We'll also move any food frames. Most of our colonies is going to be in a double brood box setup at this time. They'll have 2 deeps is what they'll be in. Any food frames that's in the bottom box, we're going to move up into the top box and move those against the walls. We want as much open drawn comb in the bottom box as possible. So we'll leave those 4 frames of brood in the bottom and fill out the rest of that box with drawn out comb, empty drawn comb. If you don't have enough to do all of your hives like that, you can use some new foundation. If you're going to use that, it'll work a lot better to try to checkerboard that in as much as you can. We'll leave some on the outside and checkerboard a little bit around the brood nest, maybe one up against the edge of each brood nest, and then put a drawn comb past that. If you got 4 frames of brood, split the brood nest in half, 2 frames of brood on one side, 2 frames of brood on the other side, and just try to mix it in. Just leave 1 foundation singles in place. Don't put 2 together until you get to the outside walls, if you're having to use drawn or use foundation in place of drawn comb. But like I said, that food, we're going to move it up top against the wall, and the idea of that is to have there will basically be a dome shaped nest is what the bees will wind up working towards. So we try to keep the bottom box full of open laying room, and up in the middle of that dome that'll be your top box. We want the honey frames on the outside top of that dome. That top of that dome is going to be honey, and so in that top box we will try to get a couple of drawn combs right in the middle of that for her to lay to be the top of that dome. Try to get 3 or 4 if we have it. The rest of the dome is going to be against the walls on the outside. You're going to have your food frames that you've had to move up, and then drawn comb right in the middle, and in the gap in between that you'll fill in with foundation. Give those bees something to draw on and work on, and draw you out some extra comb. So if you do have a lot of drawn out comb, and if the box is full of nothing but drawn comb and filled drawn comb, pull some of those out, pull some of that excess honey out, and of course if you pulled brood out for a split, replace some of that in the top with empty new clean foundation to give them something to work on, something to draw on, and it'll help keep from storing up too much in your brood nest at this time, and also give you some extra drawn out comb to work with in the future. As you're going through your hives, it's swarm season, so you're going to be sometimes finding swarm cells. Sometimes even when you have done everything that needs to be done, you're still sometimes going to find swarm cells. So anytime that you do find those swarm cells, you can use them for a split. You can mash all those swarm cells down, eliminate them, and manipulate your hive again to add more room. But also the best thing to do with them is to make splits with them. Those are going to be the best queens that you can produce, will be from those swarm cells. So just check every frame around, especially in the brood nest, around the brood nest for cells each time you got them opened up this time of year. If you're going to use those, I just pull them out into a 5-frame nook or whatever you're splitting into. Make sure you don't leave more than 1 or 2 cells. I like to leave just the best looking cell that I find and distribute those frames. If you have 3 or 4 frames with swarm cells on them, I'll make 3 or 4 splits, and I eliminate all but one good looking cell in each split. Because if you leave more than that in, they will swarm. If they have a good population of bees, they will swarm with those extra virgins and reduce the population of your nuke down to where it won't make it. It's going to fail. So just be sure to do that. Leave 1 or at the most 2 cells behind. You're also going to sometimes have a little short periods of certain things that may go to producing nectar before your primary nectar flow starts, and if you fed, sometimes your stronger colonies may have a buildup of food frames that starts to condense the room in the hive. Just remove some of those. Remove some of those food frames out. You want 1 or 2 against each wall in the top, and that's plenty. That's all they need. Pull the rest out. You can give those to some weaker colonies or colonies that don't have near as much food in them. Add them over into those other colonies, or just set them out and set them out somewhere and let them be robbed out, and it gives yourself some more empty drawn comb to use in the future. That'll allow that hive to more room to start drawing out some of that foundation that you put in, and give them more room to place that nectar in, and it just keeps them from having to move down and backfill in your brood nest, because that's when you'll set off swarming quickly. It's very important as you go through the springtime to get as much comb drawn out as possible. Place those empty foundations in every chance you get. Every time you're in the hive, you can pull out some food frames or whatever you need to pull out, and always add in some foundation to be drawn out. At the end of the season, you should have a surplus of extra drawn comb on hand, and it's just a great tool for adding in to your brood nest, creating room for that queen to lay. That is the biggest factor in preventing swarming. So just try to produce as much as possible and keep as much on hand. But one thing to keep in mind with that is having somewhere to store it. There's a lot of different ways to store it that works good. We have a certain way that we do it that works out good for us. You don't have to have anywhere enclosed. We use a Connex box, but you can also store them outside. I'll attach a video in the comments of how we store our drawn comb. It's titled Drawn Comb Storage. I'll link it in the comments below. You can go and watch that. As we make our way through these hives and making splits, the process that we do is we manipulate those hives the way that I spoke about to create room, leaving 4 frames of brood. All of the rest of the brood and any excess food we're going to pull out into a 3rd box to set to the side. We're going to set all that excess into a 3rd box. We will take a queen excluder and place on top of these 2 boxes in the existing hive. Before that excluder goes on, we're going to shake out that box, or else you can find the queen. If you spot the queen, you don't need to shake bees, but for time's sake, without spending the time to find the queen and be able to make it through more hives faster, we just shake out all those excess hives that we're removing. Shake it down, that way you know the queen is in the existing boxes. She can't be in that split you're taking off, so you place a queen excluder on top of the existing hives, place your excess on top of that queen excluder. we leave it that way till the next day. And what that allows is you're going to have, we try to leave our cap brood in the bottom for those 4 frames. Those will quickly emerge out and be additional frames for that queen to lay, but also with that uncapped brood, that uncapped larva above that queen excluder, it's going to pull up nurse bees to cover those frames. You're going to have a big abundance of nurse bees covering those frames rather than a lot of foragers. Those foragers are going to be staying down below, lower in the hive. And those nurse bees make for much better splits. So we'll leave that till the next day. We'll come back the next day, remove that queen excluder, set that 3rd box off, remove the queen excluder, place a double screen board just like here in its place, and set that box right back down on top. Now, if you have more brood frames or more food than needed for that split, we just leave 2 or 3 brood frames in a split. If you have more than that, then at this time when you come back, you can remove those and split them off in other additional splits or in some 5-frame nuke boxes, or however you want to manage those extra frames. But we leave 2 frames of brood on each side of that, a drawn out comb, food frame against one wall, fill the rest in with foundation. And that's how we make our splits in a 10-frame hive. And we will close that back up. We will come around the next day and add a queen cell right in top. Now there's other ways you can do it without a queen cell. You can use a mated queen or do just a walk-away split. There's a lot of ways you can manage that. But that's how we make our splits. In every hive, no matter whether the honey flow is going on or not, these new splits is going to be primarily nurse bees. You're not going to have much foragers. We do place a food frame in. That does good. You don't have to feed with that food frame in. They will stay alive, but they do better with a light sugar syrup, which mimics nectar. They do better with that flow coming into the hive. So we feed every one of our new splits with a 1-gallon bucket of really light sugar water, which when I say light sugar water, that's 2 parts water to 1 part sugar. So that's how we do our splits. Also, one thing I didn't mention before, while we're going through feeding, if any hives we run across that has we've added a lot of foundation in, or that just didn't have any food stored up, we'll also give them some feed. If they don't have a split above them, above the queen excluder or double screen board, we'll also use a 1-gallon bucket. If not, we have to use the 2-frame feeder in the bottom, but we do prefer buckets. They do work better. But on these splits, with that feed coming in, that always helps your queen acceptance. Even with the cells, it helps those. You always have better percentages of getting your splits queen right. It'll help build those foundations out faster, build your hives out faster. And everything works better when feed's coming in. So we always add a bucket of feed on top of every new split. That's basically all that we're doing in our hives at this time of the year, this time of the month. The last thing that I'll mention that the flow's coming up. It's different for everybody. The timing's different, but in our area, around the end of March, 1st of April, our flow will really get started. That's the only other thing we're doing is keeping an eye out for when that starts. You may already have a good idea of what that time frame is, and we do also. The thing that we look for in our area is blackberries blooming. When we start to see blackberries come into bloom good, we know the flow they're about to really start filling up frames, and it's time to put supers on. So that's the last thing. The other thing that we're doing in this time frame is keeping an eye out for those blackberries, and when we see them, we're going to start throwing on supers. So just know your area, learn your area of when you start to see the flow start to happen. Start watching what you're seeing blooming, watching in your hives. You can, if you're not feeding, you can pull those hives out and shake those nectar frames that's not capped honey, those open frames of nectar. You shake them and that new nectar will shake out of those frames. So when you start to see a lot of that start coming in, you know your flow has started. So just keep mental notes of what you see blooming at that time, the date, and start to remember each year when your flow started, what's going on when your flow started. So you'll have a good idea of what to watch out for each year, and know when it's time to put your supers on.